This is Brian Andrews, and you're watching the Break It Down show with Pete Turner.
Yeah, man, this is fun. We've been doing these things for a number of years now, and I just looked on Amazon, already a bestseller. The book's been out 2 days.
Yeah,
It's fantastic.
yeah, and guess what? The fans beat the trolls, so we got. I think we got good reviews right out of the gate, which is always nice.
Nice. Here's the book, everybody. Tom Clancy's Defense Protocol, written by our buddies Andrews and Wilson. Note the hat. And the book is called Defense Protocol. It's a Jack Ryan novel. If you've read the Jack Ryan novel, any of them earlier, there's so many great ones, but Hunt for Red October. And you guys wrote a fantastic sequel to that story. Would you call that a sequel?
Oh, for sure. I mean, our goal with that book was to do for Red October what Top Gun Maverick did for Top Gun. You know, we saw what a great job Skydance did in that movie, and we thought, oh, well, I mean, let's seize on this same opportunity and sort of take, because that was my first military thriller I think that I ever read was Hunt for Red October. Yeah. So it inspired naval service in me. It brought me into an entire universe, the submarine warfare community that I knew nothing about. I eventually became a submarine officer, doing the sort of stuff that was in that book. But it's 40 years ago, right? So that Red October came out. The submarine community has evolved, the tactics, the platforms, everything's changed. So it's definitely right for a retelling. The next generation of submariners are out there doing really cool stuff, and let's give them, some airtime, but also let's remind people why they love Tom Clancy and why Hunt for October is so great. So we tried to really capture the nostalgia, but also bring it forward to the 2024, modern.
Yeah, and you did such a great job. I mean, I love Hunt for Red October. I don't know anybody that doesn't like that movie. It's one of those ones like Tombstone. If it's on, I'm watching it. I love Grease. I love Tombstone. I love Hunt for Red October. It's a great thing. And you guys did so great with that story.
Oh, thanks.
And it was wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges with that too is, our memories are imperfect, and the movie was so iconic, right? Yeah. McTiernan did such a great job with casting and everything. The writing was great. So you mix up, and even I do it. Like you misremember. You're like, well, was this in the book? Was this in the movie? So we went back, we read the book, we watched the movie, and we're like, oh shit, I think a lot of the stuff that people really remember was in the movie, and didn't happen in the book. Like in the book, Jack Ryan, he never went on the Dallas in the book. Right. So
is that right? Wow.
Yeah. So that whole scene of him being down there, with Mancuso and, gambling on, the crazy Ivan at the bottom of the hour, that never happened in the book. But, it's a big part of people's appreciation of it. So we also didn't want to ignore it. So a lot of authors will say, well, the TV and film stuff is different. And that's good. You have to do that, I think, sometimes. But we were like, oh, we can't pigeonhole ourselves. So what we decided to do was we kind of had some Easter eggs and some nods to both the movie and the book series. Yeah. And I think the fans appreciated that. So
the universe is full of complexity now, right?
Yeah.
Like how old is John Clark?
Yeah, he's pushing 70 or he's 70. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And then you have all these other characters and different storylines. And, I know you guys all try to pay attention to that. I've talked to some of the other authors, Cameron for one, who do this. And you guys are all aware of what each other is doing. But then you can branch out 2-3 layers out because it's not all Jack Ryan stories. How much of that reading do you do, and how much talking to the other authors do you do to make sure you're not creating a rift in the canon?
So it's a great question. I think that, the temptation is to maybe worry so much that you don't want to get analysis paralysis, right? You don't want to be like, well, okay, in Sum of All Fears, he said this, and Patriot Games, he said that, and and then Mark Green did this, and Mark Cameron did that, and you'll get yourself into this loop where you're paralyzed, and you're so afraid to tell the story that you want to tell that of getting something wrong or pissing somebody off that you'll never get the book done. So I think
Right.
what we decided to do, we talked to Mark Cameron, we talked to Mark Greaney, we talked to Tom Colgan. So before we started writing, we talked to all of them and asked them, for their advice and how they did it. And so we got their input. And basically what it comes down to, the collective advice is write your story.
Right.
Don't try to write a Clancy book or a Cameron book or a Greaney book. You try to write an Anders and Wilson book, but just, be respectful of the canon, be educated, respect the characters, and that's your charter. And so I think accepting that and then going into the project with a bit of fearlessness, I think is important. If you're afraid, then your product is always going to be less bold and too pandering and vanilla.
Yeah.
And so, I think you have to resist that temptation to say, let's tiptoe into this thriller. And that's not what a thriller is. A thriller is boom, we're going to hit you with the big hook, and characters are going to be bold, and they're going to say stuff, and they're going to do stuff that's maybe controversial or takes a lot of guts. And so I think as writers, we have to sort of embody that same ethos as we approach the project, or you're going to be like, well, that was a boring book, or they didn't take any chances, whatever. So, we honor the characters, we respect the characters, but be bold and try to tell a good damn story.
I love it. Yeah. And being bold is, gosh, I mean, that's at the heart of what the Navy is, of what commanders of any kind like, right? They want to be bold. You've got commanders playing chicken out in the streets of Taiwan, and there's infills and there's exfills and there's espionage and all this. By the way, let me hold the book up while I talk about all this stuff. There's infills and exfills and all kinds of intrigue, presidents and presidents' daughters, and it's just great. And the book is called Defense Protocol, you guys, and it's fantastic. And it just came out this week. Look, I was a counterintelligence guy, so anytime you start doing tradecraft, I'm like, yes, let's get in there,
Well, this one was right up your alley then.
Oh my gosh, lots of it. And it's old school. You guys do a great job of putting a premise together that requires some, hey, you can't just rely on a telephone, right? In this universe that you guys have going on. It's great. When you look at the modern times, and I was just on a show talking, I was hyping you guys on Todd Showalter's show. And he's like, what are the cyber threats? And I'm like, you ought to be reading Defense Protocol because it's all in there, right? I walked into an airport, international. I think I was in Austria, and they're like, no ID necessary. And as I walk into the gangway, it was like, welcome, Mr. Turner, And I'm like, holy shit, I didn't register for that. I didn't like sit down and scan my face, but they sure as hell had it and knew who the hell I was.
Yeah. I think it's reminiscent of Minority Report. Remember, it's like, personalized ads everywhere you go. Your face is, popping up and they're scanning you. And I think China is the ultimate surveillance state now. We used to think that, London with all the CCTV cameras was the ultimate sort of, how do you navigate this type of place if you're a spy? But I think China now has eclipsed it because in addition to all the cameras, they also have sort of implemented this idea that the state is in everybody's business, everybody's cab, they have a social media or a social ranking for people, right? Everybody's incentivized to sort of be plugged into the system. So how do you navigate that? And that was the challenge of writing The Spider is, how did she survive the dragnet, the roundup? And then how do you continue to provide benefit? How would you operate in a place like Beijing? And I think the answer is you have to be so good that you are not flagging any of these algorithms at any time.
Yeah.
Because once you're flagged, you can't run away.
Right. And we talk about heat stakes, like how hot am I in this area? And one of the things I'll say is like, sure, I'm carrying a weapon when I'm on a combat patrol, but if I start pulling out a weapon and shooting it during that patrol, I no longer can say I'm with these guys, not these guys.
Yeah.
And so to be able to operate, you have to forego a lot of the comforts that you might want to have if you can just use and there's nothing wrong with using a hammer. I'm all about using a hammer, but for me, I can't use a hammer. I've got to use a planer. I've got to use a back rubber. I've got to use some chalk lines.
Yeah.
I don't get to lean on those things. And you guys did a great job of taking the operators out of their normal comfort zone. You know, you're relying, and this is like the old school way, you're relying on, we all know the plan. We'll all meet here at this spot in about 2 hours, 2 to 4 hours. And if not, then we do other things to communicate.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, one of the things that we try to do with our characters too is, you know, especially with like Katie Ryan, you know, she shows up in Taiwan and she's like, I don't really understand. You know, her boss gave her orders to like send her on the plane, and she's like, gets there and she's like, hold on a second. Like, what is my job? Like, what are we supposed to be doing here? You know, and that's some, you know, that's a question that in real life, real life analysts and sailors and operators, they don't always know. You know, you're not always read in on everything. You're not sure, and it's okay to actually have a character voice that. We did that on purpose, so it didn't look like she's like, well, I know everything and I know everything that's going on and I can predict everything with perfect accuracy. Not at all. She actually has to pull aside, you know, one of her teammates and be like, you gotta help me. Like, I'm not quite sure like what my role is, what your role is, what that person's role is, and what is our objective here, you know? And I felt like that adds a level of authenticity.
Man, oh man, it sure does. Because, you know, whenever I join into a unit, I don't belong to them. But I'm desperate to help them, right? And so if I come in, like the big unit, the ordnance unit above us might say, Pete is great. Send Pete out to District X, and he can support this team or this platoon or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but am I invited by those guys? That doesn't matter. The commander's sending you out there. And I'm like, no, I know it doesn't matter until I get there. Yeah. And then, you know, like, So look, regular Army, not so much of a problem because they can call the boss right away. You force me on a SEAL team that doesn't expect me, doesn't want me, doesn't want to house me, doesn't trust me. Well, then I can't operate. Yeah. I'll figure some way to do it, but I can't operate at full speed until I satisfy all those things, you know? And it's a big deal. And you guys did a great job with that.
Yeah. You have to think about, you know, what's my value add and how can I convince them that my value add is a value add, right? As opposed to them just thinking your luggage from the beginning, right? You're just an obstacle, an impediment, something that's going to slow them down or throw, you know, sand in the gears, right? You don't want to be that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a great way to talk about it because, and I'm just using my experience, I've got to justify why I need a seat. Oh, by the way, I'm an interpreter. I now need 2 seats. Yeah. Or a spot within your wedge. You have to protect me and this guy who's old. He's the oldest guy in the patrol, and we can only go as fast as he can go. And by the way, everybody, if you guys don't know this, you can't run everywhere because you have to be ready when you get there. And so if a fight jumps in front of you, that's when you're fighting. And if you're like huffing and puffing, trying to breathe, and listen, that all sounds good. You just fight through it. No, your heart's beating and you're trying to shoot. And, you know, it impacts what that element has to do. And it really, we have to talk about like the weakest link. It's not the weakest link. It's how fast, what is the fastest your unit can go and maintain readiness. Yeah. And you have this valuable asset. He's 45 years old. He speaks Dari and he understands the culture better than everybody in this patrol. You cannot replace him. Right. And so we go as fast as he can go. Yeah. And that's a big ask for a young 20-something, you know, commander, captain, platoon leader, lieutenant. You know, it's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's this element of trust and you know, the fact that there have to be handoffs and there's continuity issues, you know, with you know, with the character, the spider, she trusts Larry Sexton. That was the guy that she started her career with. It's a bond with him. You know, I trust him. Like I don't trust his boss and so, you know, for the next guy to come in, he has to understand, first of all, like, well, you know, you got if Larry is no longer in the picture, okay, then he has a really tough job because he's got to get her to trust him and also understand, you know, how to get her to trust him, right? So he's got to trust her, she's got to trust him, and then they got to figure out how to work together. And so you know, that's real life too. So we tried to put that little element in there as well.
And again, authentically, you know, when I leave an area, I'm going to do my best to hand off my person to the next person. I cannot hand off trust. I can hand off a little bit. It's very perishable. So I can say, you can count on this person I've never met in my entire life, you know?
Yeah.
And so I don't even know if I can trust them to do it my way, because how I craft that relationship is unique to me, and it's not doctrinal, right?
Yes. I like that. I like the way you put that.
Right.
Trust is not doctrinal, is it?
Right, exactly. And the doctrine isn't even very robust. And so we should all know that and just slow down. And look, what should happen in the real world, and it doesn't, and it certainly doesn't happen in your guys' fast moving world, is how do I maintain, although it kind of does, how do I maintain comms with the person that had this great relationship so that I can continue to, create trust with this person? And also this person is both the source and the handler.
Yeah.
And because there's two different ways of doing trust there.
Yeah.
So it is a very hard thing. When I've received handoffs, almost exclusively, they've never worked, and it's, I don't know. I wanted to change this up just a little bit, because we're talking so much about operations, and I don't want to just talk about the spy stuff. I want to talk about like the nitty gritty thing. I got a buddy of mine who's going to come in. You might know him. You might not. I don't know. His name's John Dempsey.
John Dempsey.
And he's a hard ass operator who I met sort of recently, and I thought he'd be a great addition into our little chat here, because he understands exfils and infills and all that sort of thing. Hey, John, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, it doesn't look like I have much of a choice, but speaking of old men, I think Wang has hung me high and dry here again. I'm out here in China trying to do that goddamn asset exfil, and we got comms that just took a shit on us. And you expect me to figure out how to do this old school Cold War dead drop bullshit. Grimes is nowhere to be found. I need some intel now.
Well, let me get involved on that.
I got some echo on Dempsey's in, so I'm gonna back off his mic. So you'll have to let me know, and I'll toggle you in, Dempsey. You are not good at comms, as we all know, but what a treat to have John Dempsey here. Maybe you are familiar with him, but if you guys aren't, there's a little bit of a funny gag going on. We've got Dempsey, who's a character from Brian Jeff's world. It's fun to have him here.
Yeah, I don't even. Did you guys even hear any of my intel questions? You didn't hear any of that? God damn. All right, well, here. Speaking of old guys and comms, I am here in Maldives trying to do this asset exfil. My comms went to shit. I got this laptop. Wang is God only knows reading a comic book. Grimes, I don't know where she's at. I just need some intel, and I cannot be doing this Cold War, cold dead drop VSO bullshit. Give me some tangible intel so I can get out of here and do this.
Adapt and overcome, brother.
Gun, and I'll kick my way into this, as always. Make the grunt be in charge of this team. This is awesome. Thank you. How's it going, guys?
Dude, that was awesome.
We've got Jeff Bosley, who's an actor. And again, I have an echo, Jeff, so I'm going to toggle your mic off, but I'll toggle you right back on. But that's Jeff Bosley. He's an actor. I'm hoping that he plays Dempsey one day when Jeff and Brian's Dempsey series gets going. But I thought he'd be a great addition to this chat. Jeff, do you have any questions for I guess for either of us, really, because here we are all talking and we all get along. I'm going to turn your mic on, but there you go.
Bosley used to be good at tech, but apparently I'm struggling today. No, actually, I wanted to ask you guys. This is so author-based, and this is definitely a fanboy moment, but are you finding it more fun from the Tier 1 series, like when you actually called the second to the latest book called Tier 1? Is it more fun now to actually start expanding that universe into those characters versus just having it being Dempsey focused, even though he's kind of still the center? Has that been like liberating as a writer, because you're like, or like, does it like now do you have to have more ideas and it's stressful now?
It's a great question. We just finished Tier 1 book 9. Okay, it's in the can. It's going into edits right now, and I think it was one of the most fun books that we've had writing in a long time, because of what you're talking about. With Dempsey, it's been about the first 7, through the book, self-titled book Dempsey. That's really that journey of door kicker, operator turned to spy, right? And all the things that it does emotionally to him and all the sacrifices he had to make, him walking away from his family to protect them and having to find a new family in Ember. And then, like you said, in Ember, we kind of turn the page and say, and that's what I thought was fun about, having the Dempsey book, self-titled Dempsey. It's a big clue to all the readers. Like, this one's about him. Like, it's him at his darkest moment. He's by himself, and he doesn't have anybody. And we strip him and break him down in the most horrible environment imaginable, Russian prison IK2. Ember is a homecoming book. So he's back at home with his family and he's trying to readjust. And that's sort of the launching pad for like his second act. Or in his case, I guess it would really be his third act, because act 1 was with the JSOC. Act 2 is, him becoming the SAD leader at Ember. And then act 3 is sort of like, well, what happens when maybe it's time for Ember to move on with him in a new way, or is it time for him to move on? So you saw, the astute readers will notice that there's like we throw these little like test balloons in that are sort of like, like those those little brain bubbles that go up and you see in comics and they disappear. It's like he's thinking about, what happens to Ember if I'm not here? Or if I retire, what does that look like? Or who replaces me? And at the same time, we reintroduced Jake. Jake, you saw Jake in War Shadows. He's out of the story for many books. And then Dempsey, he comes back and now he's in Buds and in an Ember that continues. And now, I think we're building up to that reunion that everybody's been waiting for. And so a lot of exciting things in the next book. And the last thing I'll say about it is, I love the question. I appreciate the question, because I think as authors, a lot of authors get to the point, and I'm not going to name names, but, some of our, fellow authors, it's a little bit of a rinse and repeat, it's like they run out of ideas. So they sort of rinse and repeat. And the way that we keep that from happening to us, I think, is we think about our characters like we do in our own lives, which is like, okay, well, just because I had, this birthday, or I'm no longer, I had to change jobs from this to this, it doesn't mean my life ends, right? So now you've got new emotional challenges, new physical challenge, new relationship challenges, and that's what life is all about. And so that's what keeps happening to Dempsey. And I don't really see, at some point, he either dies or he retires, but until that happens, his life still matters to him, and he's got to live his life and do his job. And so there'll always be fresh material for that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's the one thing, and it's sincerely as a fanboy, not the actor wannabe thing, but that's been the big thing I've noticed is it was written as if it were, because in a lot of TV series, like they'll actually write it so like the fact that when he went to Russia, that felt like a TV series, a jarring change, but not in a bad way. And the fact you did it in a book, I was like, oh, this is fascinating, because it's the first book series that has a real, like, it feels like it's real time, where it's not like James Bond that this guy is immortal and lasts 90 years, like we're seeing it in the course of now, 7, 8, 9 books, him aging, and getting more tired. Like that's, it seems fast in book world, but it's real world. And so as a fan, I'm liking that, but at the same time, I'm like, oh no, it's like I feel like it's in Dempsey years versus dog years. Like, I'm like, no, we can't have him go, because I know what happens where he's at. Like, I know what old and broken, where that's going. Don't take him away.
I love that. And I feel like that's, and this is where you start to get into these economic trade-offs, and every author with a successful series, you never imagine that it's going to run maybe as many books as it does. I'm sure, like, Bosch, Michael Connelly never imagined when he started out that it would go as long as it did. Or you have some of these Stuart Woods books. I think we were with an author, Brett Battles, who took over Stuart Woods. It's on number 64. So it's like, with Dempsey, at some point, you might have to reach the hard decision to say, okay, well, now he's evergreen. Like, we cut off the aging at 41, he no longer ages, and And I think there's pros and cons to that. On the pro side, it's obviously the publisher's interest to keep the series going. The fans have invested in this character and they love him and they don't want to see that end. And obviously there's a financial component too. If that's your bread and butter series, well, if I stop writing it, I don't have a paycheck. The con is, you're sort of doing the opposite of what I just talked about. You're freezing his ability to go through life stages and aging. And so, it becomes a little artificial at that point. So one of the ways that we have, and you might have noticed this, one of the ways that we've tried to address this and have our cake and eat it too, is that we've compressed the time between each book. So, the next book that comes out is only 2 months after Ember, right? So we're going to start, it's only going to be a couple months. Instead of 6 months or a year between books, it'll be 2 to 3 months between books so that we get to really enjoy that time of Jake going through Buds and SQT and Reunion and his young SEAL experience and Dempsey still operating. That's how we're going to handle it.
I actually did notice. All right.
No,
I got the mute.
I got the mic.
One.
Sorry.
I got the mic. Sorry.
He and I are like, and with the internet delay, we're just sitting here muting each other on and off. I did actually notice that, and I was thinking to myself, thank God, because again, as a fan, I was like, I can see, because I hate that stuff where it almost feels like the author goes, we ran out of ideas, so we better just fast forward for a year and a half. And it's kind of, it feels like a shitty cop out. So yeah, shortening that timeline allows you to really, in a good way, drag this on. I mean that in a good way. But then as the aging actor who's in the real world, I'm like, you need to slow Dempsey down, damn it. Like, I'm now in Jarvis age. I'm gonna have to start fighting for Jarvis. I'm aging in real time. This fictional character is like in this freeze frame, the Fountain, the youth guy. So it's a conundrum every time I read him, because I'm like, yes, no, worst enemy inside my head.
At the speed of Hollywood, we're all going to be in a nursing home by the time this series comes out. So just, Jeff, my recommendation to you is keep exercising, eat your vegetables, and, Botox. Botox can do wonders.
Got the hair transplant. The minute I got to Dempsey in prison with a ponytail, I was like, oh my God, man, stop it. I don't have luxurious locks. I'm going to be like Steven Seagal, fat, acting in a chair if we don't hurry this up.
Jeff has got.
I gotta go. I do. Brian, it was awesome to see you. Thanks for letting me play and mess with your day a little bit. Pete, as always, I appreciate it.
It was awesome. Highlighted my day.
Oh, good. I'll go work out and be a little bit more self-conscious. Hollywood hasn't done it enough.
Eat some greens.
Take care, brothers. Bye.
All right.
That was
a lot of fun.
Dude. I love that.
Yeah. And it's good to have a little bit of fun. I mean, it's incredible to have someone so passionate about your character, and you can't pick a better guy than Jeff to play.
Oh, he'd be amazing. He'd be an amazing Dempsey.
Yeah, and to have that
control.
Oh yeah, no, right. Yeah, we're not actually, just for everybody watching, we're not actually politic. Jeff wants to, he's a legitimate actor, but it's cool to be able to bring someone in who, for a few minutes, plays that character for you.
Totally.
And you guys created that. That's amazing.
Yeah, and it's amazing too. Sometimes we'll get emails from people and they'll say things like, I really miss Dempsey. I need to know what's happening with him and the family, or him and Ember. When's the next book come out? That's different than saying, hey, I'm excited to hear the next story. Like, when does the next book come out? It's, I miss this person. They feel like a real person to me. I've invested in them, emotionally. That's pretty cool, right? I mean,
yeah, it is cool. I want to go. I do want to talk about the current book. I'm gonna hold it up again.
Yeah.
You guys always know what I say. I'm gonna put the link up here for it so you can buy it. And there it is, right there. There it goes. This is called Defense Protocol. It's a Tom Clancy novel written by Anderson Wilson and you should get it. And I always say, buy 2. It's Christmas season. Hell, buy 3. These are great gifts. Anybody who loves military thrillers, anybody who loves Tom Clancy, anybody who loves Anderson Wilson, this is a great book. I've definitely enjoyed reading it. And we were talking a little bit about the tradecraft and all that fun stuff. If you guys like that, I'm telling you, I had a great ride. And I know a lot about this world, but I also have done a lot of stuff in this world. And so legitimately, Defense Protocol, awesome. Total 5-star rating. Did you guys know that you written such a banger of a book? I mean, it's look at your level, you finish a book and it's done. You're like, that's good. You know, whatever kind of things you guys aren't crazy about, it's going to go out because the time's a ticking and you guys are prolific. But I guess the question is how do you know when you've really nailed a book? Not that you want to put out an inferior product, but what is that like?
I don't think you know. I mean, I think that the thing you worry about as an author are your blind spots. So like there's certain chapters and sequences that you feel pretty good about, like that objectively, you know, it's good. Objectively, you know, this sequence was badass or whatever. But it's the stuff you don't see, the stuff that you feel like you missed. I don't know, like how's that going to resonate with people and stuff like that. So, you know, it sometimes surprises us the things that turn people off. We've written a few books that are a little bit more speculative, and it's interesting, you know, I talked about going bold and taking chances and stuff. And, you know, in the thrillers, we have certain guardrails. In our speculative stuff, we take those guardrails off. And some of the chances we take, people don't like them. You know, they just don't like them. And for one reason or another, that we always get surprised by that. So, you know, Katie Ryan was a big risk. You know, it's a male-dominated genre, a lot of male readership. Are they going to embrace, you know, Katie Ryan, or is it going to seem like Anderson Wilson went woke? I mean, this wasn't a political endeavor. This is Jack Ryan has kids. Jack Ryan Jr. has his own series. And oh, by the way, the military is full of amazing, talented, super smart, incredible women who are out there serving, risking their lives and doing great work. Right. So let's not pretend that that's not happening, right? So I think Katie Ryan was a risk. We weren't sure how people would resonate, if she would resonate with all the readers, just the female readers. Well, man, I mean, the feedback has been resoundingly positive. Everybody likes her and they see why she's an important character. So that was really, really cool. I think the other thing I want to talk about is just this idea that, you know, we're 2 Navy veterans taking over the Clancy series, and it really selfishly sort of gives us an opportunity to bring Big Navy back into the franchise. Yeah. You know, Red October, Red Storm Rising, really big Navy books. It's been a while since there have been big Navy books. You know, we focused a lot, the other authors focused a lot more on geopolitics, covert operations, you know, special operations. Whereas, you know, Big Navy has sort of been, you know, taken the back burner. So in Act of Defiance, the hero platform was the Virginia-class submarine. We tried to introduce the world, reintroduce the world to submarine warfare and what it's like to be operating underwater in the dark. Now, the hero platform on Defense Protocol is an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. And, you know, what's interesting for me as a sub guy is to think, you know, if we're doing a mission and we're at periscope depth and things get hairy, there's a very simple solution. You just go deep. You know, you think the ship's at risk, you go deep and you hide. And you have confidence that nobody's going to find you and that you can shoot back with the torpedo and you're probably going to win. Arleigh Burke, man, it's like going out and standing in your front yard with no clothes on and you got your rifle and you're like, if you got to take this house, you're going to come through me and anybody can see you, anybody can shoot at you. You're not hiding. You're not running away, you know, and that it takes an incredible amount of bravery. You have 500 people on this ship who said, well, following orders means going into the lion's den. And if they start shooting, we're going to get shot first.
Yeah. I love it. It's, you know, bringing the Navy in is great because there are a lot of these, no shit, there I was stories. And we get these things from that and they're wonderful. But I do love how you build it up. And look, I've read a lot of Tom Clancy over the years, and so you get a sense for what the next chapter might be. Although sometimes you're like, and then off in the ocean is a redwood tree, and you're like, oh damn, now what's wrinkled? But in the case of this chicken that I was talking about, that the Americans and the Chinese are going into, and I'm not spoiling the book for anybody here, but you guys do a great job of building that up. Before you even do that, though, the ship, the USS Jason Dunham. And I know that story. I've had that guy's commander. I've had the guy who is doing the documentary called The Gift on my show. And when you understand what Dunham's story is, this is not like Vincennes was a person, Arleigh Burke was a person, and they're kind of lost in the fog of time. But Jason Dunham was a kid, and he jumped on a grenade, and they almost didn't want to give him a Medal of Honor for that, Yeah. And so you guys do a great thing in allowing him to be alive before he becomes a Vincennes or an Arleigh Burke, and you're like, who's that? Who's Nathan Hale? I don't know. It's just some dude, right? And that class of ship or that ship name, it really means something because his family is still around and they can read that. And I just wanted to tip my cap to you guys because I was so glad you didn't have to do that and break into the story. And you guys don't get out of the story, but you add that piece in. And it came in at a perfect time. And because I'm so familiar with the story, I'm like, how coincidental that these guys are going to do this thing. And it's very much what Jason did. And I just thought it was great. So thanks for doing that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, so Alton Dunham, who's Jason's cousin, is a friend of ours. And he's been very instrumental in, just providing us coordinating access to subject matter experts in the Navy. I mean, he works in the Navy, and Alton has just been a champion of ours since day one. Before we'd even written the first word of Act of Defiance, he's like, "What can I do to help? How can the Navy support you guys?" And so, we were talking about it, and it just sort of came up that Jason was his cousin, and we said, "Oh well, here's what we're doing in the next book." Yeah. And it just seemed like such a great way to honor, Jason and like you said, a story of heroism. And then you look at, that scene you referenced is a good one because we're looking at the ship's motto, and you think about, we interfaced with the USS Porter. And Mitch Harillo has a big cameo in the book. Mitch was a CSO on the Porter, but he's the guy who was assigned to us as our subject matter expert. But, we didn't talk to the CEO of the Dunham, but we had to imagine what it would be like. Okay, you're inheriting the legacy of the ship's name and Jason himself. And that has to mean something when you check in as a member of the crew. What is your lodestar? Right. Well, there's no better lodestar than Jason, right? So I think it sets the command climate for the boat. And also, there's a metaphor there too, right? We didn't send the Jason Dunham in there with the carrier strike group. She went in alone, right? She's got to go into the straits alone and, potentially risk the ultimate sacrifice. So there's a big metaphor. A lot of people won't pick up on that. Obviously you did, it touched you. Yeah. That means something to us. And I think that's the difference between a human being writing a story and artificial intelligence. I mean, we're going to be competing against fucking ChatGPT, excuse my language, writing books, and people are going to claim and maybe it write a good book, but it won't be able to do what we just talked about. It won't have any idea why that matters. And so that's why there still needs to be a human component and a human behind the wheel when we write these stories.
My buddy Brad, you might even be watching the show right now. He and I do a lot of episodes almost weekly about AI, so we can all understand what it's doing. And I'll just use my layman term. Brad's an expert. I'm just learning about it, but it's taking one of the most common next words. And so if I say my checking, it's going to say account. Or my checking, whatever it is, and it'll try to guess the next word, and it'll do that very fast. It's incredible how fast it does it, but it won't know about the gift, and it won't know about Tim Cruikshanks and his Bone Frog coffee, which you guys name check. And I'm waiting for my name check. But those are things, those little notes that when you guys take a twist, just and that little thing with Jason, you could have easily skipped that and gotten those 150 words back, but you didn't, and you took that slight detour that you can't even tell it's there, but it's very important. And I don't know how often a ship's name is important to, you know, how the elan of the crew or everything, but I do know that when I was in Germany, our main building was called Pruden Hall. It has a picture of Pruden and his Medal of Honor and his story of you know how he died at Vietnam at 19 years old. And if you don't know that, someone's going to make sure you know it, because that is the standard. And so these names, they do matter, and maybe one day an AI kind of thing can get that, but not like you guys did it. And it really it touched a positive nerve for me to see you guys do that, because it means a lot to me, that story, to talk to the people around, you know, and that whole thing from Saving Private Ryan, like, did you earn it? All those guys have that. They all have that. We're like, I have to do a better job because I've been given this life that I wasn't supposed to have.
Yeah.
Whew. So really fun. And I don't want to spoil anything, but there is this confrontation. Obviously, it's a thriller with war, and these two ships come together. Even when you write about the maneuvers, and I don't know which one of you is better at doing that, or if you guys both work on it together at the same time, but you know, you can see the ship doing its football move. You guys characterize, you know, it's incredible to do that, and to really, like, I'm seeing the silhouette of the tower as they start to see it across the horizon. Again, this doesn't ruin anything for anybody, but you see these things. It's very cinematic.
Yeah, thanks. I remember, you know, when you're officer deck on a submarine, you know, it does amazing things in a straight line. Turning it doesn't turn on a dime, you know, and so you have to plan every maneuver, and people will say, well, how could you possibly run into something? Well, you can run into something because, you know, the thing's a football field long, and it takes many football fields to stop, and it takes many football fields to turn. And so, you know, it is sort of like football moves in slow motion, and we think in terms of football moves, but this ship can't execute like that. And so this game of chicken, you know, I really wanted to try to translate that experience that I had as a ship driver, and how stressful it is and what it feels like, and that you are playing chicken with, you know, 500 people and, you know, a gazillion tons of steel and all the warheads and fuel and everything that's on there. And you know, the other thing we were trying to characterize is that these two ship captains, the Chinese ship captain and the American ship captain, Jeff Kreutz, they are both sort of they're empowered to complete their mission, but they both know if they shoot at the other person, you've probably just started World War III. So, you know, how do you do that? And so that's what that game of chicken is them trying to figure out, can I complete my mission? Can I intimidate this other person without having to start World War III? It felt very tense when we wrote it. I hope it was like that on the page.
No, it for sure came across, and it brought me back to Hunt for Red October, where the two captains are tete-a-tete, and they're wanting to leave off ramps, but having to escalate, you know, and you guys do a great job of that. And I'm thinking about, there's a confrontation on one of the ships where there's an argument about, you know, what was supposed to have just happened.
Yes.
And, you know, it's powerful. And again, I'm shielding some of the story because I want you guys all to enjoy it. It's so good. So let's get away from the ships, because I don't want to get any further into that. That hope you tease that. Let's get back into the intel stuff. I love it. And I've talked to you guys about this before, but I'm not a big fan when and this is not you guys, but in general, when like the intel dude is a nerd who works on a computer and that's it. Like I'm a pretty tough guy. Back in my old days, I could throw a football. You know, I can run with everybody, but I'm an intel dude. You know, and I can shoot all these things, right? And I rarely see a character like that. I know a lot of dudes like me who are like, yeah, I went the intel route because I don't mind writing the reports, and that makes you hugely valuable to a team. You guys do a great job of spreading, not just stereotyping. Sometimes stereotypes are important because they tell part of that story, right? But you guys do a good job of spreading the skill around, and don't just make look, I'll be a little bit hard on the Jack Ryan Jr. character. He's a little bit too perfect, you know, languages and karate chops and, you know, outwitting people. I would like that spread around a little bit so there's a little more vulnerability, and it's tough to do in a series because you need your hero to be the hero, but you guys do a good job of mixing that stuff. Is that making sense what I'm saying, or am I just
and I think the other thing that's part of that is that and this, like the intel community is not recruiting just analysts and quote nerds, right? So like right. What you see is a migration of people who have experience operating, have field experience, moving into logistics planning and analysis, operations officers who have in the past actually been there, done that, right? So they bring a level of field expertise that's really important when you're planning these types of ops. And so what we tried to show in Defense Protocol is you have this sort of blended team with Katie and Kanza. Now, Kanza was a SEAL. Now he's at ONI, right? And that's not unrealistic. Jeff Trussler, a friend of ours, he's the outgoing director of naval intelligence. He was a submarine warfare officer, just like me, right? So they want warfare trained officers in the intelligence community, because what is the purpose of intelligence? The purpose of intelligence is to inform and allow operations to be conducted successfully, right? So that's the goal. Get people who have lots of experience and expertise in the discussion. Maybe they're not the sharpest guy. Maybe they don't have a 1600 SAT. And you need that person with a 1600 SAT because believe me, they're going to see stuff and recognize patterns that maybe other people won't. But it's the combination, I think, of everybody in the room that ends up making really, really good decisions.
Yeah, and I would say, just to amplify what you're talking about, if you've got the field experience, you understand that it doesn't go your way all the time. And we make mistakes. I can tell you 100 mistakes that I made that I learned from and got better. If you've never put your feet on the ground, you can still contribute. But if I say to you, what about this? And you blow it off, and I'm like, well, then the person on the ground can't blow it off. Like, they're still left with that burden. And if you haven't bothered to think through that, let me help you think through that. Yeah. But it's very uncomfortable to plan with an operator and someone who is a book person. They have to blend together. And I think that the operator is more apt to blend in with the book person, as opposed to the book person surrendering their intellect to say, wow, I haven't thought about these things. And I've experienced that a lot of times. And I don't think I'm being unfair when I say that.
Yeah, that resonates with me. Yeah.
Yeah.
We used to say that, in the submarine community, like the currency that we traded is competency, right? The currency of being a good officer was competency. Right. And so I noticed that no one ever wanted to look stupid, right? Because if you looked stupid, it meant you're not a good officer, you're not a good submarine, right? But the fact of the matter is, I think there has to be a certain level of, what do I want to call it? Humility, right? This recognition that, this is a complicated job, and I'm smart. I deserve it. I deserve a seat at the table because I passed my tests and I passed nuke power school and I got through prototype and I'm qualified. But you know what? I don't know everything. I haven't operated everything. This is a complex machine. Nuclear power is complicated. Casualties are complicated. They don't go as expected. So you have to be able to say, I'm willing to accept that I'm wrong. I'm willing to accept that I don't know everything. And you'll be a much better shipmate if you can do that. And some guys just never could do that. They didn't want. They had to be the smartest.
I think this will resonate when I think about how to give someone an idea of what it's like to be me. I want you to go out and put 35 pounds of gear on your shoulders, on your traps, and just walk around every goddamn day you go to work. And you don't get to be tired. You don't get to be too hot. You don't get to be, and you have to prepare. You can never be dehydrated. You can never take on a super hard workout, because if you get stiff and tight, that's dangerous to everybody else, right? So all these things. So you go live your life that way, and then talk to me later.
Yeah.
I went through a round of training, and everybody's doing their best, right? But I don't need to learn how to be comfortable wearing a body armor and a kit. I don't need. I know what that feels like, and so in training, no thanks. I don't have to get used to it, and so I should be able to say to the first sergeant, "Hey, I don't need to wear all that stuff. I've been on more combat patrols than you have. I just, if you need me to wear it, I will, but I don't need to put the blanket in. I'll have the costume on, but I don't need any more damage on my body." You heard Jeff talking about it.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to get people who haven't done that work to go, you know what, you're right. Just, let's get your body moving in a way that makes sense. Because at the time, I couldn't even throw the grenades because my shoulders were so shot from combat that I had to underhand shot. By the way, and I'm a DA civilian. Why am I doing grenade training?
Yeah.
That's so crazy. So that was good. I wanted to go back to the very beginning, what we talked about, and I didn't know we were going to talk about it, but I think it's great. I'm writing a novella. I'm probably never going to publish these things. These aren't really things that I write to be published. It's an exercise in creativity for me.
Of course.
But you take a guy like me and you do like the raw deal thing, like we need you right now. What does that look like? And really, a lot of what this looks like in my novella is we don't know what you need to do, nor do we know what the goal is. We just know we need capacity over yonder, and we're hoping that you could help us out and don't get anybody in trouble.
Yeah.
And that's like a legitimate mission is like, how do we find out more about this area when we can't get people in? You can't get people in. That doesn't mean that I can't work my way into China. And it doesn't mean that I'm trying to do anything illegal either, right? So how do you develop an asset in a place of China that's very cloistered, or in the Arab world where it's very, very, very obvious when you're not from that world?
Correct.
And those kind of stories are really fun to think about, because the path you have to take has to be their path. It can't be the American path. And if you know how to do that, then you can become normal as an abnormal person in that environment and operate. And the spider, one of your guys' main characters, sort of does that within her own world. But to think about that, the unknown and the unknown of the unknown, and then trying to be helpful at the instant they need you to be helpful, requires constant stacking of exercise and context and all these other things you have to just do in the blind and just go, I know generally if I go in this direction here, I may never be helpful, but I will always be ready.
Yeah. And I think that there was a big discussion we had about, because one of the hallmarks of the Jack Ryan series is that John Clark is operating in the field and, operating in China as an American, Caucasian American, like you said, it's almost nonsensical. You're going to stick out.
Right.
And so that's why we made the decision that, the Spider and Jian really needed to have their own threads, their own subplot, and they needed to get themselves to Clark, because Clark can only do so much without jeopardizing, the mission. And we even had, an incident with Ding happen that we did that on purpose, just to show that, like sometimes all the chess pieces on the board, you don't get to use them. Right. So that was sort of a big monkey wrench that got thrown into Clark's plan, and he had to see how he could adapt and execute. Now there is, of course, a little bit of suspend your disbelief. These are thrillers, and, sometimes, you have to pretend. That's why we got out of Beijing at one point, simply because we just felt like, it's too big of an ask to have a big chase scene in Beijing and think that they're actually going to get away, that Clark would get away. Impossible. So let's not insult people. So we moved some of that action, to the countryside.
Yeah.
And I think that's what sets Andrews and Wilson apart. Maybe, I don't know. I think we only try to ask our readers to suspend their disbelief on things that we're willing to suspend our disbelief on.
Yeah.
That's sort of our promise to you as a reader. Like we'll never require you to suspend your disbelief on something that secretly Jeff and I are like, well, that's bullshit. Let's throw the bullshit flag. But these stupid people who are reading, they're not going to know that. No, we never do that. If it doesn't feel right to us, it doesn't go in the book.
Yeah, it's one of the characters, and I may hide this so much that you're not even going to follow, but one of the characters is brought in from the past, and something is asked of this character, and the person's like, I don't know, I don't remember, It's been too long,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's a real thing. Yeah, like, oh yeah, we all feel brilliant when the realization is, oh, this asset is available, but yeah, you call them, and they're like, well, I don't have an answer for you.
Yeah.
You know? And that's reality. Is sometimes, you know, it's all a balancing act, and someone's shaking the balance beam around, and so you're like, I don't know, do I just rush forward and do this? Do I try to be even more surreptitious? Do I try to be more careful? You know, and it's great. You've done it for me, because again, I know this world. It was great because I could see like the thing with Ding being like, oh wow, that's going to create a problem. They're going to have to not go with plan A, B, or C, or D.
Yeah.
You know, but a guy like Clark's like, we can do plan M, and I don't know what that is, but there'll be one. You know, and so all of these things were great. They created great suspense along the way. And I'm reading this as someone who knows the job, someone who loves the series, and also someone who is a mechanic who tries to write their own things. And I'm like, this is wonderful. Like, this is teaching me how to set suspense out into the future. Because like, oh wow, that's gonna create something. I can't wait to read that chapter when we get back to this part of the story. And I thoroughly loved that. It was really, really wonderful to be able to see that and then realize it. So not only do you resolve the note, but I was like, I know they're going to resolve this note. And so I had anticipation for your guys' delivery, and always paid off. And I think that was great about the book.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, you never know as an author. That's the challenge. You don't know if it's obvious, like, you know, the suspense that you're setting up, the stakes that you're setting up, the things that you want the reader to be nervous about for the character. We know what's going to happen because we know the end. So we never get to experience the joy of reading the book and going on the journey, not knowing how they're going to get to the destination. And so when you talk about, like, you had asked that question earlier, and I guess this has been me thinking about it a little bit. It's like, that's a big unknown for you as the author, is did you execute on that element? What were the things that you thought would be gut-wrenching? Were the things that you hoped would be suspenseful? You don't know. And you will never know as the author. Only the reader can tell you, can answer those questions.
Yeah, that you're right. Only the reader can resolve that. So here's a reader's question. There's a hideout in the book. This is for everybody. I'm not trying to spoil the story. And the people are hidden under the floor of something. And so this brought back to me a memory of a book that I've read about, this is an actual person who was a slave, and they were trying to escape. And this is, you know, in America. And so they lived under the floor of their friend's house, like a 20-inch tall space, and just laid there.
Yeah.
You know, and have you guys read this book at all? It's an incredible book. Yeah. And so very, very similar, the vibe. So I'll send you the link to the book. But yeah, this slave basically lives, you know, like, there's not a basement. This is just like in the space. And she can see life. She can see her kids, but she doesn't dare make a peep. She's terrified constantly. She's going to be found out. Yeah. You know, they scour the countryside looking for her, and eventually she gets to get away. And that's the wonderful part. And she writes this wonderful book and describes this thing. But the tension from her story landed in your book for me.
Oh, cool.
It was like, yeah, it's a gimme because she did such a great job. And I thought, oh, surely one of the two of you read that book before, because you did such a good job of paralleling like the emotions. But it's also something you can imagine as being terrifying. And you're always afraid because you're trying to hide from this thing is desperate to find you. And the last thing you want to do is be found out.
Yeah. When we were writing that, so there was a part where, you know, because I'd worked on a couple of those chapters, and I was thinking about how, like, you know, okay, there's some human biological logistics that have to be handled. And so, you know, how would they, you know, when did they go to the bathroom? How do they eat? You know, and so it just made sense that, you know, these things would happen at night, you know, when nobody's there. And so, of course, like, that's when we decided to set up the, you know, the inspection happens like right in the middle of one of those things, you know, worst possible timing. And so, you know, defense minister has to make a choice, and it's a pretty rough choice that he has to make. Right?
Yeah. And you when you're living your life in one direction at one speed, and then all of a sudden that speed gets changed to right now, you're never ready for it. And you can't live your life waiting for right now to happen.
Yeah.
It's all of a sudden you realize the things that you didn't do that you needed to have done. And now you're left with whatever the result is from not being prepared for that instant, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And he was a person, he's a character. The other thing we try to capture with that is, you know, he's at the top of the food chain. And suddenly now, by the decision he's made, he has to put all his faith into one other person, you know, his survival, his longevity. He's got to cede control to the spider. And that's not easy for him to do. And I think that's realistic, right?
No, it is. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, again, I'll just go back to my experience. When you are in the intel world, you're not trusted by anybody, even in your own organization.
Yeah.
You're not, no one, we don't wear pins. We don't wear hats. We don't have tabs. We don't have badges. We might have actual physical badges, but there is no badge that's more worthless than the counterintelligence badge. Like, what's that thing? Is that even real? People have actually said that to me live in real life. And so, you know, you do have to prove like your life is in my hands. And so do what I'm saying, because I am your best shot. You know, you want to go on your own. Well, fuck you. Like, my life is at risk too. You can't just do that. We're stuck together. And it is a real thing that commanders, staff, other people, they have a hard time trusting a thing that is a spy. And now you got to think about, and we really have to do our job in the real world.
Yeah.
So you've got problems with your peers, and then you have to actually go out and do your job. And so, again, you guys captured that well too, because it is not easy to do what someone says. And there is just, I mean, that's why we have bona fides, right?
Yeah.
Because we have a relationship, but that's based on something that's happened in the past.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's, yeah, it's crazy. So I don't want to take too much more of your time. We've been about an hour, and you were a super good sport with the whole thing with Jeff coming on. But is there anything else you want to talk about with the book? I think it's wonderful. Everybody should get it. There's the link. What else do you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only other thing to mention is that, well, two things. One, we just want to thank the U.S. Navy for supporting us on this adventure. We want to thank the crew of the USS Porter, who, you know, helped us by serving as subject matter experts and teaching us about what it's like to be a surface warfare officer, and serving on Arleigh Burke, and the challenges and dangers and complexities that go along with being on that platform. And then I guess just bring your listeners that happen to be readers of our stuff up to speed. It's been a busy couple years for us, and thank you for your patience. We're writing 4 series, and we love all of them, but, you know, there's only 2 of us, and we have, you know, a series, you know, there's no parallel production. Everything's sort of going one after another. So for those of you who've been patiently waiting, here's what's coming up. Here's the good news. After a little bit of a delay, book 4 of the Shepherd series, Dark Rising, is coming out in April. So that's pretty exciting. It's been a little while since we've seen Jed and Joshua Bravo and Sarah Beth. So we're back to that story. A lot of people have asked us, are you going to write any more Shepherds? And yes. So book 4 comes out in April. July, Sons of Valor 4 comes out. A lot of people thought that series was done after Sons of Valor 3. They thought it was just a 3-book series. But the fan response has been so great, and the publisher loves it. So we're going to write more. So Sons of Valor 4 comes out in July. The next Dempsey book, I think, is coming out in October-ish. So that'll be Tier 1 Book 9. Don't have a title for that yet. And then the next Clancy comes out about the same time next year, 2025, first week of December. It's also untitled, but we're working on that. So we got great stuff in the pipeline for everybody.
I love it. I love it. By the way, the author of the book I'm thinking of is Harriet Ann Jacobs, and everybody should read that book. Yeah,
cool.
It's wonderful. I'll send you the link in text.
Yeah,
but everybody else, thank you all so much. Go to andrewsandwilson.com. You'll find these guys. You know, just type in Andrews and Wilson. Shoot, they'll come up and get everything that they write, because it's all wonderful, and you're going to have a great time with it. All right, let me roll the credits here, and I'll be right back to you.
All right.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much.